would have said yes, but I wouldn't have really known for sure because I hadn't seen any. But you know, bluebirds are in Pennsylvania, are supposed to be around, and I would have thought, yeah, I guess we probably do. But they were probably very, very few. Way back in the 1960s, I think it was 1962, she published a book. I'm sure you've heard the name Rachel Carson. She's a big name in Pennsylvania because that's where she's from. And her book was called Silent Spring. And in the book, she was talking about how each year there were lesser and lesser songbirds. And she kind of got the movement going over pesticides and those sorts of things. And it really made some changes. By 1967, Pennsylvania had banned DDT, which was the real bad one of the bunch. And by the early 70s, the whole country had banned it. And it really made a difference. Look at the bald eagle, for example. Bald eagles, DDT was affecting their eggs. And the eggs were too soft, it was cracked, they wouldn't hatch. And the eagle population went, but it has made a real dramatic comeback, you know. And so there are some things improving. In fact, there's a lot of things. I can still remember when I was young, I'm sure maybe some of you, when you used to go to Johnstown and Pittsburgh and places like that, how smoky it was. And back in the 1950s, they actually had what we used to talk about Los Angeles and the smog out there. We used to have those sometimes heat inversions in Pittsburgh and places like that, and people would choke and cough, and it was, really, that's changed. You don't have that anymore. Of course, sometimes people say, well, how about the invisible stuff? Maybe that's worse than the stuff that was there before. I don't know. Sometimes it really can be. And I can certainly say some good about rivers. I know I grew up, there was a river, it was called the Little Conemaugh because it fed into the Conemaugh River. It was really a sewage. Back then, a lot of the towns, that's where their sewage went. It went right into rivers, And that had happened. Crescent, and Lilly, and all these places up there in Cambria County. I was from Lilly originally. That's where and we used to have a name for it, a four-letter word. It started with S, crick. I can imagine what we were saying, and that was actually true. Believe it or not, there actually are fish in there. There's stocking fish in there. I don't know if I could ever eat the fish out of there, honestly, but I don't know that, okay? But they are living, it's just, so there are some remarkable things. And the same is said for the bluebirds. Their populations were down. Basically, DDT was one of the problems because they would eat the insects that had been poisoned, and it just builds up in the system. A second thing that happened to bluebirds was the places that they would live. You remember the days of the old wooden farm posts? Some of them still have them. Back then, though, they weren't treated like they are today. They were, and a lot of them would rot. They became the homes for a lot of your bluebirds and things like that. They've been replaced by metal. Plus, a lot of the old snags and trees that had holes in them, kind of out in the middle of the field, where because bluebirds like it out in the open, they were cut down, used for firewood and stuff like that. So they were losing their place to live. And then another thing were birds. The house sparrow and the starling. They're not native birds to the United States. They were brought over to this country, and yet now they are the two most common birds in our country. House sparrow and the starling, and both of them will destroy the nest of a bluebird. Well, one of the things we do is when we build the bluebird boxes is the size of the hole. Okay, and that helps some. It'll keep the starlings out, but it won't keep the house sparrows out. So we're lucky. Like here at the park, we don't have a problem with house sparrows because we're up in a rural area. But if you're in an urban area or in towns, then you're going to have the problem. The house sparrows are going to come in there and they'll destroy the nest. If you take a look at this picture right here, you can actually see where a house sparrow killed the bluebird and then built its nest kind of right over top of it without even getting rid of the dead body. So those are the things. Anyways, they caused a real decline in the populations. But it's amazing. Sometimes there are things you can do. For example, the wild turkey at one time was almost extinct. Restocking programs, changing forest, they're everywhere now, The wood duck, it was a beautiful colored duck. they found that they could build houses for it, wood duck boxes, you know, because it would, what they do is they would be in trees next to the water. They don't necessarily have to be in water, but when the young are born, then they plop out. Sometimes they plop down this ground down there. I wonder how they don't get hurt, you know, I guess, you know, but sometimes they'll plop right down into the water. And the bald eagle, you know, I know you know the fact that birds imprint upon an area. They'll come back to where they were born. Same thing for the bald eagles. But it doesn't happen right away at birth. It takes a while. So what they did back in the late 70s, early 80s, they went up to Canada, Saskatchewan, and that's where they were bringing bald eagles back before they imprinted on their home. And they would put them in these artificial nests. They call them hacking towers. And there would be like a screen there where they would feed them fish and sometimes even live fish. And they, you know, they were getting fed and they were happy and developing without the human contact. And then when they would mature and fly off, that was where they were imprinted. And when they matured, 4 and 5 years later, when they were ready to have families, they came back, and that's how we've gotten all these birds, you know, back in Pennsylvania. And then pretty soon they come back here, but there's already a couple more, so they just keep expanding. It keeps expanding, and we can do the same thing with the bluebird. It's been a real success story. We have a lot of boxes here at the park. No one is really taking care of them the way they used to, but you know, we'll talk a little bit about that. And they're just amazing little birds. I mean, everyone has animals that they like and they don't like. You know, I mean, rabbits are wonderful until they eat your vegetables and your garden and your flowers, right? Same with deer, where they come in the winter and destroy all those shrubs and things you've spent all summer, you know, pampering, trying, and they come in. So some animals, you know, you look at them that way. And of course, the bluebird really doesn't seem to have any bother us in any way, so I guess everybody's kind of happy about them. So we're going to start off by talking about the box themselves, and you're going to be building a box. There's different ways you can make them. On this one, the roof is right at the top like that, and we're not going to do that one simply because it's a little trickier to do. We're going to put our roof will be down a little bit like that. All right, so that doesn't really make any kind of a difference. All right. The thing here, you do have a little seam back there where, of course, water could probably get down in, whereas you didn't have that when they're put in this way. There's a lot of different styles. They don't have to be this style. You know, they can be round. The only important thing is enough space inside, little ventilation, and the size of that hole. That's the real key, because out there in nature, they use a lot of different places. Okay, folks, couple last minute things here. Most of us are finishing up. You can always put more screws in if you want. You can paint them if you want. And when it comes to this part right here, it should be able to open. And sometimes what we do is this. If you would like to have one of those drilled, you can, on yours, I'll do that for you now. And you don't have to, but it keeps, excuse me, keeps from being able to open up this animal that could do it. Mostly they don't bother with it, but sometimes what will happen too is it might work its way open a little bit, you know, sometimes. If anybody wants that, and at that point then, when we're done, you have your box. I hope you can take it home and put it up somewhere. It's still early. You could probably get a nesting bluebird yet in it before the end of summer. And want to paint it, fine. You don't want to paint it, fine. One other thing I did fail to mention, the size of that hole is very important. And that, because the bluebirds can go in, but bigger birds can't. And so that's... Any specific question? Okay. Anybody then who would like to have a
a lock on their door. Just, tell you what, just bring it up here and I'll do it for you.